Have you ever wanted to ride a motorcycle to the Arctic Ocean? I did exactly that this summer, and in this video, I'm going to be going over all the gear that I brought with me up to the Arctic, as well as some things that I might change if I were to do it again. The tent I brought with me on my trip up to the Arctic was the REI brand Groundbreaker 2. It was a cheap, maybe $125 tent. I think I got it on sale like 8 years ago. And I brought it for a number of reasons. The first reason being is that it was really small. It packed down very small, which for me on the bike, that was kind of the number one priority. It wasn't necessarily weight. It was how tiny I can make it so that it fit into my luggage a lot easier. And also how easy it was to set up. That was kind of the second thing. And this one was super easy. It was just your standard, you lay down the tent itself. You put in 2 poles into the sides and clip them up. Takes like 2 seconds to set up. It's an exaggeration. It probably takes about 2 minutes to set up. It had a rain fly, which was very useful because I did see quite a bit of rain during my trip. I did not bring a footprint for the tent. I don't own a footprint for that tent. And if I were to do it again, I would definitely bring one. There was multiple nights where it was just pouring rain and storming, and the ground would be having water come up from underneath and actually flood the bottom of my tent. And to combat that, I actually had to do that while I was on my way up to the Arctic on the Dempster Highway. It was in Eagle Plains, which is kind of the first fuel stop. I camped right there, and what I ended up having to do, because the ground was just puddles everywhere, there was not a dry spot to be found. I just took a bunch of my dirty clothes and laid it underneath my sleeping pad so that it wouldn't come up and get me wet and get my riding gear wet, which it worked. But then I also had a bunch of wet stuff with me for pretty much the next week of my trip until I was able to do some laundry. But yeah, it's a cheap tent. You don't need crazy gear. The biggest things for a tent on a long motorcycle trip, in my opinion, is going to be how small it packs down and how easy it is to set up. Because the last thing you want to do after riding for 8 hours or 9 hours during the day is set up some complicated big tent that, you just want to crawl into it at the end of the day. Or at least you want to get it set up so that thing's done and you can enjoy just being at camp in the evening. If I were to ride up again, probably wouldn't take that same tent. The tent recommendations that I've been given are the MSR and Big Agnes bike packing tents, specifically the Big Agnes Copper Spur 2, which is about this big when it's packed down. It has super short poles and then is just rolls down really easily. And that way you're able to save space, and also it seems pretty straightforward to set up. So going forward, I think I'm going to purchase one of those and use that on my longer trips. The next most important piece of gear to me on a long motorcycle trip is going to be my camp cooking setup. Again, the biggest factor for me when selecting a piece of gear is going to be how small it is, and I'm stoked on the setup that I have. So I'll show you right here. What I have is this kettle, which allows me to boil water. It's by GSI. It's super lightweight. It's like a lightweight backpacking kettle. But inside of the kettle, I can fit this MSR, I believe it's the Whisper Light stove. They cost like $25-$30, so they're relatively inexpensive for a camp stove. And it just connects onto the fuel right there. And it takes up no space. Look how tiny this thing is. It's maybe, 2 inches tall. But this thing's great, and all of my camp stuff fits in here. I have this little soap cleaner for cleaning up dishes, a lighter. I even have this. Pour over coffee maker that I'll bring with me. I brought this up to the Arctic, as well as some coffee from Bivouac Coffee, which was great for when I woke up in the morning and it was cold or stormy and I'm like, I gotta ride through all this. I would just make a cup of coffee, kind of center myself, get myself ready for the day, and it would be a much more pleasant experience than on days where I had to crawl out of the tent, break down camp, and just start riding into the rain. But this setup is great because of how compact it is, how easy it is to use. The only other thing that I'm not showing you here is that I also did bring a small pan. I brought a small pan with me that was the same size footprint or slightly larger than this kettle. So it went straight on the bottom and didn't take up any extra space. And when I'm cooking at camp, usually I will try my best to find things that I could just make with boiled water. So I'll get some deli meat or something like that, and then I'll get like rice-a-roni packets or pasta or backpacking meals, things that are small, things that are easy to carry on the bike. They don't take too much effort to cook, and I'll make them in that mostly with boiling water. But occasionally, I would buy like a steak or a kielbasa or something like that. Bring that to camp, cook it up in the pan, and then add that to the rice or pasta or whatever I'm making. But fantastic. The brand for the kettle is GSI, and then MSR makes the stove. You could find these at REI. I think I actually bought the GSI kettle on Amazon as well. But yeah, highly recommend. Another factor too, if I know that I'm going to be going through like a major town or even a small town, I'll generally try to plan my route so that I'll have at least one major meal for the day when I go through that town. So that way it just avoids me having to pack stuff on the bike or worry about refrigerating things if I'm going to be out. So if I know that I'm going to be ending near a town, I'll maybe just eat dinner there. Or if I know that I'm going to be riding through a town early in the day, I'll wait to eat breakfast until I'm there. And also utilize that as an opportunity to stock up on supplies if I'm not going to be going through a town the next day, or plan my route so that I can get a meal at a restaurant, or if it's grocery store deli, something like that. Even on the way up to the Arctic, it gets super remote up there, and there are plenty of riding days where you actually don't go through a town, but you'll go through a gas station, and the gas station, if it's remote enough, usually will have some kind of hot food there. So it's easy to plan like that. You don't need to carry a week's worth of meals with you, but I would generally keep at least 2 days worth of like survival food on the bike with me, and try to eat at least one meal a day as I'm passing through somewhere. Sleeping systems, that's going to be tied with camp cooking stuff for importance on a long motorcycle trip. And you might be tempted to bring a big, bulky sleeping bag with you and a really comfortable like air mattress or something, but they take up so much space on the bike. And if you're riding up to the Arctic, especially if you're going up the Dempster where it's actually engaged riding, you're not just on pavement the whole time. You're riding on a dirt, loose gravel road that is not maintained year round very well, and the conditions could cause it to be slippery. You want to have as light of a setup as you can, or at least have as efficient a setup as you can, so you can actually focus on riding the bike and having fun while you're riding it, rather than just trying to control the bike and surviving. And so for my sleep system, I usually bring not super bulky sleeping bag. It's a 0 degree by a brand called Hike and Bike. They make bike packing equipment, so it gets down pretty small. But for this trip, I wanted something that was even more compact, even smaller. And so I went with the ZenBivy sleep setup. Let me tell you, I'm not sponsored by ZenBivy. I've never even contacted the company, and they've never contacted me. ZenBivy is awesome. They're perfect for long-term motorcycle travel. They have a bunch of different sleep systems. I went with their 25-degree down sleep system. They're not sleeping bags. It's like a quilt and then a sheet, and the sheet goes over your sleeping pad, and then the quilt straps onto it. So if you're a side sleeper like me, you're able to toss and turn around without having to worry about being constricted like in a mummy bag like you usually would. And it's amazing. I slept so comfortably. It was summer in the Arctic, and believe it or not, it's not always icy up there. It was cold some of the nights, especially with some of the storms that we had. But the 25-degree down bag was more than enough for going up there. Highly recommend it. It compacts down to the size of like a Nalgene bottle, basically, for the whole sleep system, and it's fantastic. If you're planning any sort of multi-week or even multi-day motorcycle camping trip, I definitely recommend going with the ZenBivy sleep system. It's going to be comfortable, and it's going to save space, so that way you can put other stuff on the bike or just have a lighter setup overall so you can have fun when you're riding off-road. And that brings me to the sleeping pad, which, let me tell you, my sleeping pad setup was not ideal for my trip. In fact, I used a Climate Static V sleeping pad, which they used to be awesome. Years ago, I did some brand work for them, and they were great sleeping pads. They were comfortable. They were easy to inflate. They were almost impossible to get a hole in. And I've bought 3 of these because they sell them at Walmart now. I don't know if they changed their manufacturing process or something since then, but they're now like kind of a budget brand. They're like, I want to say $40-50 for one of the sleeping pads. And they work great for like 3 days. And then what I tend to find happens on the last 3 that I've purchased is that they start seeping air out of the seams themselves. I thought that I had poked a hole in it. I was trying to find, bubbles. I was patching it, along the way on my trip. But mine got a hole in it after about 3 days into a 5.5 week long trip. And I did not replace it because when I noticed that that it was losing air through the seams and not just like a hole that was poked in it, I was already far enough away from Walmart that I wouldn't be getting one again. I didn't get back to a Walmart until I went through I guess Whitehorse, and they didn't have them, and so I think maybe somewhere around Banff or Jasper at the very end of my trip. And at that point, I wasn't going to buy another one. So for almost the entirety of my trip up to the Arctic, I was just sleeping on the ground. I was laying out the sleeping pad so that I wouldn't be just straight on the ground. And there was some layer of insulation there, but it would deflate within, 10, 15 minutes of me putting it up. So I do not recommend the Climate sleeping pads. I actually have this guy now, which I've used on a couple trips since then. It's just your standard, foam sleeping pad. This one's by Nemo. I got it at REI. This one I will just strap to the top of my panniers. It is bulky. It is not the most ideal system, but if you're going somewhere where it's not too cold or you're not too worried about the space, then this is a great option. Since then, I have been shopping around for sleeping pads. I will definitely invest in a nicer one before the spring when I start going on much longer trips. However, in the interim for my last trip to Utah, which was a little over a week long, I just got an Amazon one for like $25, and that held up way better than the Climate one. So steer clear of Climate if you can. For their sleeping pads, I can't speak on any of their other equipment. But find something that is, again, packs down small, so it's most likely going to be an inflatable one. And find something that has good reviews, so that way you're not just sleeping on the ground like I was for 5 weeks. Let's go over clothes. So for clothes, I packed more clothes than I needed to, which I feel like we're all guilty of for motorcycle trips. I packed like 3 or 4 t-shirts. I packed 2 pairs of hiking pants. I packed base layers. I packed a puffy. I packed a hoodie. I packed a beanie. I packed enough underwear so that I could crap my pants every day for the trip. And I packed 4 pairs of wool socks. Definitely more than I needed, and if I didn't have sentimental attachment to the clothes that I brought with me, I probably would have ended up throwing them away or donating them along the route. But going forward for longer trips, and even on my last few trips, what I generally try to pack or will try to pack is going to be 4 pairs of underwear, 3 pairs of socks, one of them being a thin pair of socks, like something you would like run in or something like that, and then 2 being like something that's moisture wicking, like a wool sock. I bring 1 pair of hiking pants. I get like the tan or khaki hiking pants that have belt loops, so that if I'm on a trip, like, and I go into a town and I want to go somewhere nice, I'm not looking like a bum wearing my motorcycle pants or a pair of shorts or something. I'll bring 2 or 3 t-shirts, 1 base layer top, 1 base layer bottom. I'll bring a beanie, a hat, and then I do like to bring a hoodie. That's kind of like a comfort item. I like wearing hoodies at camp, and it's my security blanket, essentially. It just makes me feel kind of at home. And then I have a puffy by Mammoth that packs down really small that I also bring on all my trips as that extra warm layer. Now, that's not including my motorcycle gear that I wear. I wear a pair of Alpine Stars Tech 7 boots for protection. If you're doing the Dempster, you could do it in street motorcycle boots just fine, but there's a lot of places where there's opportunities for you to drop the bike, and I like having the protection and the confidence of knowing that I have the protection of those Alpine Stars Tech 7, like the motocross boots. If the bike were to fall on me, it might hurt, but it's not going to break my tibia and fibia in half. On that trip, I brought along First Gear Kilimanjaro riding pants and jacket. It's an older pair. They've since updated the model. Mine's like 10 years old. It was the first like real riding gear that I bought, and it worked fantastically. It is great in cold weather, which I wasn't riding in winter weather on the way up, but it definitely was pretty chilly. So you could throw a hoodie on underneath it. It has vents for when it's hot. You feel very well protected. It's got armor in the elbows and shoulders and back and all that, and the knees. It worked out great. I have since gotten a pair of the Basilisk IR pants and the jacket from Moscow Moto, and those are great. They're way better in warm weather than the first gear stuff. They are breathable. They've got vents all over the place, which is nice. They've got like nice little touches where you can, pin the lapel back or whatever, so that way when you're riding and it's super hot out, you get more airflow going on. And they have integrated armor that's not as bulky, and so you don't feel like you're wearing a big heavy suit. But it's if you size up, you're still able to throw on, I put a pair of sweatpants underneath and a pair, in a hoodie underneath if it's cold, which I've done a lot of actual winter weather riding in the last few weeks. I rode through 20-degree weather and snow to get to Utah on my last trip, and I was bundled up under that stuff. But yeah, the Moscow Moto Basilisk IR jacket and pants have been treating me well, and that's going to be my go-to going forward for future trips, hot or cold weather. And of course, you need something on your bike to actually put all this stuff that you're bringing with you into. Luggage system, super important. And I'm not saying that you need to go out and buy an expensive luggage set, but I am going to say the nice things that I noticed about what the luggage that I brought. I used the Moscow Moto Reckless 80 bags. It's a rackless system, so you just toss it over the bike and strap it down, and it was the perfect bag for the trip. It was easy to take the bags on and off of the bike and throw them on my tent if I needed to. It was pretty easy to pack. It has this beaver tail on the top that you can put a bag under, and you can also put additional things underneath. So if you want to bring firewood back to camp, you can shove it under the beaver tail. It's really customizable in terms of like what you're putting under there. For my trip, that's where I kept most of my camera gear, was in a bag underneath that, and it worked out great. It was easy to access. It was easy to take on and off the bike if I needed to. I have 2 auxiliary pockets that they sell for the Reckless system that I put on. In one set, I put a pair of trail runners, so that way I wasn't just wearing my motocross boots everywhere I went, especially at camp. And then in the other set, I had a tool bag, so it just had basically enough tools to take apart and put together the bike. The DR650 is super simple bike and only takes like 20 small tools to be able to disassemble the entire thing. But the Reckless system, absolutely fantastic. Since then, I've gotten a pair of Moscow Moto's Backcountry 25 panniers, which I have on the bike now. I'm not saying that they're better than the Reckless system, but they definitely serve a different purpose. With the Backcountry panniers, I'm able to put on a Pelican case on the back of the bike. And so I'm able to carry my camera equipment in there, which is a little bit more secure. I like it because I can lock it. So if I'm going to leave my bike somewhere like in a city or something like that, I'm not just leaving a bunch of camera gear on the bike that somebody could, undo a couple of buckles and grab. And also the weight on the bike seems to be more like down towards the center of gravity, which I notice a little bit when I'm riding. I will say that the Backcountry panniers have a mounting system that is much heavier than the Reckless system that they have. So I loved the Reckless system for the Arctic. If you're riding up to the Arctic, you don't need to take the whole luggage set off the bike a lot. Then I think that the Reckless system is a lot better. It's a lot lighter, and it's just a little bit more customizable for what you're doing. If you're going to be going up and you're like me, where you're carrying camera equipment with you the whole time, and you want to be able to take the system on and off the bike, like say you're not much of a camper and you want to stay in hotels a lot along the way, you're able to take the Backcountry system just off the bike super quick. It's just like a little latch, and you can lock that latch too, so that way nobody else is stealing your luggage. But it's different systems. They both have their benefits. I've been using the Backcountry panniers a lot more on recent trips, just because I am carrying a lot more camera equipment with me. But if I were to go back up to the Arctic again, I would definitely throw the Reckless 80 back on for that trip specifically. Then there's everything else that I brought with me, the little items. So I brought the tool pouch, which I talked about briefly. In that tool pouch, I have a trail stand, which is just a very compact stand that you put on the swing arm or put on one of the front forks, and you can easily maybe jack the bike up while you're out in the boonies. If you need to take the tire off for some reason to change a flat or something. I brought a spare tube with me. I bring the 21-inch tube, which is for the front tire. And the reason that I only bring the 21-inch is because you're able to use that in the rear in an emergency if you needed to. Whereas the 18-inch that's in the rear wouldn't be able to go under the 21-inch front wheel. I bring tire spoons to change the tire with, a little bit of dish soap, a Motion Pro trail bead buddy, which is very useful when you're trying to change a tire out on the trail. It helps keep the tire in the center of the rim, so that way you're able to get a new tire on and get the old tire off a little bit quicker. I bring a portable tire inflator. I just have like the Slime brand one that you can buy at pretty much any motorcycle store or Walmart or AutoZone or whatever. It's a little bulky, which is something going forward for longer trips. Like if I were to go down to Central America or back up to the Arctic, I would probably get one of the more compact ones they have. Trail Tug makes one that I've heard good things about. It's about this big. And I'll probably end up getting one of those for my future trips. I bring a headlamp, obviously. I bring an extra lighter. I bring a small first aid kit. I think that going forward, I'm going to be carrying something that's more substantial, like a trauma kit, something with like a tourniquet and some stuff like that. The first aid kit that I have really wouldn't do much in the case of a motorcycle crash. It might help me if I needed to, it's got like Band-Aids and gauze and super glue in it, and that's pretty much it. Going forward, I'll definitely be getting a trauma kit for longer trips. There was some parts, especially along the Cassiar Highway and the Dempster Highway, where I felt like I was very remote. And if I were to have crashed and gotten injured in a significant way, I would have been in some serious trouble with the first aid kit that I was carrying with. I brought a spare pair of sunglasses, and I brought a pair of clear goggles. The goggles came in handy. Usually when I'm riding, I will just wear sunglasses and leave my visor open. But there was so much rain my entire way up the Dempster that sunglasses weren't working, and the rain would actually hurt my face if I was going fast enough, which a lot of the times when it was raining, the road is so slick that you're not able to go fast, but it would still not be comfortable. So I would want to close my visor, but then the visor, because of the rain, you couldn't see through it whatsoever. So the clear goggles helped quite a bit with that. They were easier to see out of when it was raining. I definitely recommend bringing a pair of clear goggles or possibly smoke colored goggles or dark goggles. Just because if you're going up the Dempster Highway, when it's dry, it gets super dusty, and the goggles help with that more so than the sunglasses or the visor. So at least bring a pair of tinted ones or shaded ones for dry conditions. But the clear ones, I think, are a little bit more helpful because you can use them in the dusty conditions, but you can also use them if it's raining or snowing or foggy or something like that. And then there's camera equipment. I carried a bunch of camera equipment with me. If you were doing the same trip as me and you weren't planning on making YouTube videos and taking photos and bringing like essentially a small production studio with you, and just brought the stuff that I've brought outside of camera equipment, you would be super lightweight and you would have such a blast on the Dempster Highway. In terms of camera equipment that I brought my Sony A7 IV. I brought 3 lenses with me, all of which are somewhat larger lenses. They're the Sigma Art series lenses. I brought a 24mm 1.4, a 50mm 1.4, and an 85mm 1.4. And those took up quite a bit of space, quite a bit of weight. I brought a drone with me. I brought the DJI Mini 3 Pro. I brought a GoPro Hero 11 Black. And then I brought various mounts and filters and additional batteries and chargers for all those things. And it ended up weighing probably just as much as all of my other camping and riding gear combined. I also brought a Peak Design tripod with me, which is lightweight and small, but it still is a bulky enough item where it can be kind of a issue if you're trying to pack light, pack small. But if you're not bringing all that stuff, the Reckless 80 will be. If you're not bringing all that stuff in terms of luggage, the Reckless 80 will be so much space. You'll have so much space left over, which is great. They also make a Reckless 40 liter, but I always like to say that you can get the bigger one and just not fill it up as much. Whereas if you get the 40 liter, you might still be pushing it to be able to fit all your stuff into there. But yeah, if you are bringing camera equipment, the stuff that I brought that I just listed worked out great for creating a lot of some of my favorite today images, as well as getting a lot of footage and content that you see here on YouTube and on my Instagram. You don't need to necessarily bring as much, but I would highly recommend bringing a drone. I used the DJI Mini 3 Pro because it has professional qualities in it. I'm still able to get very good images and cinematic videos. However, it is underneath that 250 gram threshold that both the United States and Canada have for requiring some sort of drone or FAA license. I forget what the Canadian version is called, but you can kind of bypass that. If you get a small drone like the one that I did, you don't have to apply for the license, but that doesn't mean that you could fly it wherever you want. There is still restricted areas. You can't fly the drone in national parks or near airports or in cities and stuff like that. So just keep that in mind. But it worked out well. Along the Dempster, I got a lot of really cool drone videos. I wish I pulled it out more, but it was raining the whole way up and I couldn't fly it. But I'm very stoked on the stuff that I did get. So if you wanted a dumbed down version of what I brought, you can bring your camera. I would bring like one lens that's like a zoom lens, maybe like a 24-70 or 24-105, and then bring a small drone and a GoPro, and you would be set, and it would take up a lot less space than what I brought. Other small items that I brought that were more of creature comforts than they were essential. I brought a camp chair, just a cheap one off Amazon. I think the brand is Marchway. Which is really nice. When I was at camp, you could just set it up and enjoy the sunset and have somewhere to sit down that's not on the ground or a log or something. So that was super nice. I brought, obviously like a hygiene kit, toothbrush, toothpaste. I brought a razor with me, which I used once about 6 days into the trip and then just didn't use again and grew a big old bushy beard. So maybe leave the razor at home. You're on an adventure. It's okay to be a little feral. Little creature comforts can, make a long trip feel a little bit easier. Just stuff like the chair or, bringing, if you have like a Kindle or if you, stuff like that, can really make it feel like you're not so far away from home when you're chilling at camp, especially when you're out somewhere remote. Like there were places I was camping, especially along the Cassiar Highway, where I felt like I was on a different planet. It felt like the nearest people were thousands of miles away. Realistically, they were maybe like 90 to 100 miles away. But when you're camped out by yourself in the woods and you're thinking about bears and you're thinking about wolves and moose and all this stuff, when you're by yourself, just a couple of creature comforts can make you feel a little bit more at home rather than worrying about the boogie monsters out in the wilderness at night. So if I were to do the whole trip over again, I would change a couple of things, but for the most part, my packing list would stay the same. I would bring the Reckless 80 luggage system because of how easy it is to pack and how easy it is to adjust that beaver tail on top for throwing extra things in there. I would change out my sleeping pad, get something that has a lot of good reviews, that's not going to be leaking from the seams. If it were to get a hole in it, something that I could patch, probably something from MSR or Big Agnes or Thermarest. I would change my tent. I'll probably be getting one of the Big Agnes copper spur tents, like I mentioned earlier in this video. And I would definitely bring a footprint for it in case it rains. I would be keeping the Zen Bivy sleep system. I would bring the exact same one I brought, which was their 25-degree down sleep system. That is the perfect system for any long motorcycle trip. If you're going somewhere with hotter weather, they make like one that's not 25 degrees rated that you could get that packs down even smaller. But for the Arctic, I would get the 25-degree one just in case, because they get chilly Arctic weather up there any time of year, and you really don't know. I would leave a lot of the clothes that I brought at home. I would take that down to a super minimal list. We all want to bring 7 pairs of underwear and 7 pairs of socks and 7 t-shirts. But the reality is, when you're on a long motorcycle trip, you and I both know that you're wearing that same t-shirt for like 5 or 6 days minimum. So bring like 2 or 3 t-shirts, you can do laundry along the way. In fact, it's really nice when you get into a town that has a laundromat and you're like, I'm not in a rush. I'm going to do laundry and watch some Netflix and take a break from riding today. It's awesome. It gives you an excuse to chill out and, explore the town and not just be pounding pavement or pounding miles day in and day out. So narrow down that clothing list. Bring a couple of pairs of underwear, bring a couple of pairs of socks, a couple t-shirts. Make sure that you got stuff for cold weather just in case, especially going up to the Arctic. But don't bring your whole closet with you like I did. And the only thing that I can think of that I would change out of like my toolkit would probably be my tire inflator. I'm looking at the Trail Tech one that's pretty small. It has a lot of good reviews. So I'll probably end up purchasing that one. And I'll do a gear review on that on this page. But the Slime one, I didn't have to use it on the trip, which is great. It just takes up a lot of space, but I've used it before to change tires here in the garage, and it does work. It does do its intended purpose. It's just bulky. So if you can get a smaller one, especially one that's battery powered, that also has the ability to be plugged into 12 volt just in case, that's going to be an ideal setup for you on the tire inflator. But other than that, I think my packing list would remain relatively similar to what I brought up there. You know, I would just trim the fat, and I would change out some items for other brands that are more reputable. You don't need to bring a lot with you. You know, you can pick up stuff as you go. I would just make sure that you have the essentials with you on your way up to the Arctic, because once you get north of Vancouver, north of Squamish, you're getting into the territory where there's towns and you can get things, but they might be a 2-day ride away rather than just being able to pop over to the Walmart real quick. So if you're planning on riding a motorcycle up to the Arctic Ocean, I hope that this video gave you a little bit of insight on what to bring and what to leave at home, or at least gave you enough information to figure out what's going to work for you. If you want to see more videos like this, let me know down in the comments. I'm going to be putting out a lot more content on YouTube, stuff like this. It's longer form, that's a little bit more informative. Let me know what you want to know about the ins and outs of riding motorcycles long term, or gear questions, or even how I make these videos. If you like the video, let me know, and subscribe and turn on notifications if you want to see more stuff like this coming in the future. See ya.